Also, I have a Doctor of Public Health programs in Johns Hopkins now in my year 5 studentships right now, and focusing on health policy and sort of technology driven and innovations in all sorts of developing countries and as well as in China. And mainly focus on telehealth and telemedicine in transactions and cares and health service research and evaluations. Very honored to be here with you guys. Thank you.
Great.
Well,
hopefully in the future we have
people.
Yep, go ahead.
The young ones are so important, in the mission. Very good.
So we're all young.
Yeah,
Yes.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
One younger than the other, but we're all
Yeah.
young. At least young at heart, right?
Yes.
Yes.
That's right. Yes,
I feel this group needs a boba tea right now.
So fortunately for us, we still got a rose among all the thorns.
Ah.
A beautiful rose among all the thorns.
Yes.
Young thorns and old thorns.
No, the young ones and even younger ones.
Yeah, that's very good. Yeah.
Engineer Bernard Lim, while waiting for others to join, maybe we can start with full already. Yeah.
Sorry?
Yeah, maybe we can start now by waiting for others to join,
Sure, we can.
Yeah, okay,
I think we will probably start the session then. Okay.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
How
All
many
right,
people do you think we have today?
Okay, so all right, let's probably start today's session. Good afternoon, everyone. So welcome to today's IEEE Entrepreneurship AAET joint webinar session. The title of today's talk is Technology Entrepreneurship in ASEAN. We today, of course, as we were chatting a few moments ago, we have 3 renowned speakers that comes at different areas of expertise here, and spending their time today for today's session. So as we probably know from the flyer, ASEAN as a whole is a booming economy, and technology itself or technology entrepreneurs plays a very vital role, and what I call as the next phase from what most countries should be, besides industrialization. So today itself, we will start today's session by first having our AAET President and Utah President, Engineer Professor Dr. Yu Hon-tat, to provide us the welcoming address. I pass the mic over to you, Prof. Yu.
Okay, thank you to Engineer Bernard Lim Wing, who is the moderator for today's webinar, and he is also AAET Associate Fellow and Chairman of IEEE Penang Joint Chapter. Okay, first of all, I'd like to actually thank Dr. Sao Shan Liu, Asia Chair of IEEE Entrepreneurship, whom we have actually met recently, and then also talk about how AAET can work with IEEE and then see to promote entrepreneurship, especially in this region of the world. For AAET, because we have actually our fellows and members from 10 ASEAN countries, and it is also a booming economy region that we continue to actually help train and develop more talents in the areas of engineering and technology, and also, of course, along the way, helping them to know about entrepreneurship and how they can be involved in entrepreneurship later after their graduation. So we believe that this is something very important for the development, especially in ASEAN countries. And today, we also like to also thank our speakers, Ms. Ao Fong, Senior Program Advisor at the United Nations Technology Bank for these developed countries, and another speaker, Dr. Sao Shan Liu as well, who is going to actually give his talk again, also on this area. And then we also are very honored that today our AAET Fellow, Mr. Goh Peng Ooi, who is the founder and also executive chairman of Silverlake Group, where their group actually is key actually developers and also provider of the the financial system to many of the banks in Asian countries and even the other parts of the world can come in. And he himself is also somebody, a technopreneur who actually have successfully built out and developed his actually company and through the technologies and all that. So today we are really actually very happy to have these three speakers with us and through the panel discussion and all that. As we can see, with the emergence of this now we call this 5G technology, AI, fourth industrial revolutions and all that, the dominance of actually technology in the efforts in doing entrepreneurship is getting more and more important. And today's webinars between IEEE entrepreneurship and also AAET will definitely actually encourage more of such activities, especially in the regions of ASEAN countries. So last but not least, I'd like to thank the organizers, the moderator, the speakers, and also all of you who actually attend this webinar today. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Engineer Dr. Professor Dr. Yu Hon Tat, for the welcoming address. Next, I would like to also introduce Dr. Liu Shaoshan, which is the ASEAN Chair of IEEE Entrepreneurship, to provide also the welcoming address for today before we start with the three speakers. So I pass it over to you, Dr. Liu.
Oh, thank you so much, Bernard, and thank you so much, Professor Yu, and thank you, the organization of AAET for having us. So I represent IEEE. The motto of IEEE is to advance humanity with technologies, which is exactly what we are trying to achieve here during this meeting. Hopefully, this will be a series of meetings and events in collaboration between IEEE Entrepreneurship and AAET to boost entrepreneurial activities within the region. I just took a trip actually in ASEAN countries. I feel the immense potential over there for the next generation of technologies, which we will talk about today in a lot of talks following up. Also, we have the distinguished honor to have Al joining us from the United Nations. She will talk about a lot of social entrepreneurship facade of things, especially how UN can collaborate with different entities to make our world better. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. So before we start, let's have a group photo together. So I hope that everyone that is present today would be able to turn on your camera. We will take a group photo right now before we start with the three speakers. Dr. Fook, would you be taking it, the group photo?
Yes, I'm taking, yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.
Okay.
So let's see. We give a couple of seconds for folks to turn on their camera. Hope that you all could turn on so that we can take a group photo of everyone.
Yes.
Bye.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
ready?
ready?
Okay,
We have a few more.
Yeah, a few more
Are you
here.
yeah, you got a few more. Are you able to turn on? So that we can have a nice group photo with everyone, the first session today.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay,
thank you.
Ready? 1, 2, 3. Yeah, taking one more. Okay, thank you. Thank you,
Okay,
everybody.
thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right. So some logistic matters before we start with the first speaker of today. First thing, of course, we would basically go through the three speakers' talk based on the agenda that we have provided. And then we will follow up by the panel discussion. In the panel discussion, we would have firstly answered the Q&A session. For those of you who would like to have any questions, you have any questions, you can please type it in the chat box located at the bottom of your screen. Or if you would like to do that, if you think that you prefer to talk at the end of the session, which is during the panel discussion, you can raise your arm or your hand in the reaction box, and then you can unmute and ask the question as well. So there are two ways to do that. Then in the panel discussion as well, there will be questions answered. Otherwise, I would also produce questions as well from today's talk. And then, of course, follow up at the end, there will be a quick 5 minutes closing remarks by each speaker. So there'll be 5 minutes for each before we actually close for today's webinar session. All right. So I know some of you have just dialed into today's call. So today's talk is being brought forward. So the organizers is ASEAN Academy of Engineering and Technology, AAET, and also collaborating together with Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, IEEE Entrepreneurship. And basically, I'm today's moderator. Bernard is actually, I'm today's moderator. So the session will last from 4 to 5:30 p.m. Of course, if we do have a lot more questions, I think we can afford a few more minutes after that. All right. So thank you very much. So let me start off with the first speaker of today. I would first introduce the speaker and then followed by passing the mic over to the speaker. So today, we have the first speaker of today from United Nations. She is now located in Turkey. And basically, Ms. Alkong, she is the Senior Program Advisor at the United Nations Technology Bank for least developed countries. So she has 17 years of international cross-sector experience in global strategy, technology for peace and development, and public-private partnership in the United Nations system, private equity firm, tech, and leading think tanks. She was specific delegate by Carnegie Council for Ethics International Relations, a featured speaker in Milken Global Conference and Harvard Business Review, and also MIT Soft Challenge Leadership, guiding tech-based social entrepreneurs to solve world challenges. So I hope that all of you attending today will take this opportunity, right, to from sharing of Ms. Alkong. And also, of course, if there's any questions that's raised, that you can just type it in the chat box that she can help to answer at the end. So without further delay, please allow me to pass the mic over to Ms. Alkong for our talk for first topic for today, that is developing STI ecosystem and social entrepreneurship to meet United Nations Sustainable Development Goals in ASEAN and beyond. I'll pass the mic to you, Ms. Alkong.
Hello, yes, thank you everybody. It's such a pleasure to be here today, and thank you, distinguished chair, and Dr. Shaoshan Liu, who was my alumni from the Harvard community. We're also collaborating on several different public-private partnerships projects to look at how to advance the sustainable development goals. I also want to quickly introduce, I have our Public Information Communication Officer, Ms. Chen, also on the call from the Technology Bank. If in the future you want to have more information from us, we can put her in contact as well. Thanks for being here. So without further ado, first, I'm very happy to be connected today. The ASEAN platform is kind of a homecoming experience for me. From 16 years ago, I started in private equity investment, investing in technology, entrepreneurship, focusing on frontier markets at the time. And at the time, most of the frontier markets, meaning Southeast Asian countries and China and, you know, some parts of Taiwan. Over the years, from that experience to being an economics officer and public information officer for the former Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, his collaboration and UN's collaboration with ASEAN countries. Until today with the Milken Institute, some of you may know, working on financial markets and technology for, you know, people's benefits with the Asia headquarters in Singapore, and our past experience with MIT. I think as all of you know, the ASEAN region has become such an instrumental power and technology leadership in many, many ways. And part of it because the ASEAN countries and Academy of Sciences been taking the lead to advance the infrastructure, because as we know, without the enabling environment and ecosystem, entrepreneurship couldn't flourish. So one of the topics we're going to touch upon today is how do we look at entrepreneurship from a bigger picture? On one hand, operations, capital markets. How do we finance ourselves? How do we make ourselves scalable? How do we attract capital? But on the other hand is also what are the policies are? What are the gaps and areas that engineers or IT professionals can see opportunities and tap into the unmet needs and not jumping on the same, repetitive patterns. So I will start by saying, in my mother tongue, Chinese, we call the engineering professionals as the digital brick builders. In a way, we feel these digital brick builders and foundations are today to advance as the indispensable means to an end, which is for the inclusive prosperity and sustainable development with the 17 goals that the United Nations and all its member states set for sustainable development, which is very inclusive development and opportunities for everyone. And one of the logo is also called the leaving no one behind. For instance, with the 10 ASEAN states, 3 of them are least developed countries, and 2 of them are actually graduating. That is a clear evidence that this region is developing very fast, but also there are different tiers of markets. If you look at Singapore, the needs for entrepreneurship and the opportunities would be different for the opportunities that Myanmar or maybe a future member, for instance, East Timor, would present. So the first lesson here is look at the whole region and see what are the different tiers of markets in the countries and in the region, and how can we make linkages between these different tiers of markets. So your business model and your way of collaborating with the government or with industry can be applicable by grouped contexts. So what do we mean by that? For instance, one of the favorite quote I like is to say, a technology is not a product, and a product is not a business. A business is not a solution unless you work on these linkages and make one and link one to the other. So what does that mean is that from, for instance, our experience in the technology bank and in our collaboration with other parts of UN entity, we can see that in some contexts, let's say you have a technology that can be used for agricultural basis or energy basis. However, if you fail to turn that to a sustainable business model, you fail to have the operations and the capital markets to support you, the technology would always sit on the shelf. Then for the next step, once you have the business model, you build it as an enterprise, how do you make it a solution? I think, for instance, next example, Dr. Liu Shaoshan would mention the self-driven cars. It's clearly an example when you have, first you have to bring the technology together, but at the end, you also have to have certain supporting infrastructure. In ASEAN, a popular concept, for instance, is smart city. So why is smart city important? Because a smart city can link different data sets, different...
Delivered to ano, test na yun eh. Yung na-deliver ito, United, bakit veterans yan? Oh, napindot nyo.
I think we have some participants need to mute. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Those that is not not in the questions, can you please turn off, unmute your mic, please? Thank you very much.
Yeah. So now I think it's working now.
Okay.
So I will continue from where we stopped. Basically, when we thinking about number one, what is the technology available? Number two, how does this technology turn into an enterprise, a business that can sustain itself, that speaks to the capital, that supports it, and have the scalable potential, not only in one context, in one country, but be able to truly be a leadership or fast or tried and true model in many different contexts. Then the third step, which is also becoming more important nowadays during the post-COVID world, because COVID definitely showed a weak link between artificial silos. What I mean is that if you have public sector or governments or, you know, the United Nations working on its own. And then you have the private sector, the academia, the engineers working in different silos. It's not going to meet any sustainable development goals for the society, because any problem, as we know, it's a live organ. It's the Asian philosophy, as we all understand, that, you know, if you have a headache, it may come from other parts of the organ, right? So similarly, if you want to address any issue, maybe it's energy shortage, maybe it's an education problem, maybe it's a youth employment, you need government guidance, you need academia, you need engineers and entrepreneurs to work together. That's what we mean when after the business, it have to come together to a whole society solution. So my first ask to our entrepreneurs and engineers today is to see, when you start with the social entrepreneurship, there are some key questions you can ask for yourself. For instance, do you have the end in mind? Are you only starting from the technology you have, or you start by thinking, who will be the end users, for instance, and in what context are they using your products? In context, meaning in who are the population, what are their profile, under what circumstances they're using your products, and maybe even the weather, maybe even the natural resources, maybe even their income level would impact how they use your products, for instance. And then the next level would be, what are the synergies you can create with your ecosystem and other service providers? For instance, a long time ago, I was building the biggest biotech center in Africa, which was located in South Africa. But once we have all the technology solution ready and even had the investment ready, we found there are other issues. For instance, who would own the data? You know, the data ownership that touches big population would be the government, would be, you know, the companies that sequencing the data. What about, you know, providing the land and logistics, for instance, and what are the publication rights? So we end up bringing the Academy of Sciences, the Medical Research Council, different, you know, power plants, and different up-end and lower-end suppliers and collaborators together to bring the solution into one. So nowadays, it's very important for social entrepreneurs to think you are not operating on your own. You're working in a big ecosystem that you have to think about whose needs you're meeting and also who you need to make these systems sustainable. So in that way, I want to really compliment on the AAET and IEEE partnership, because that's exactly what the UN is trying to build nowadays, is how to make sure all the support and knowledge is not a one-off thing. That's why we need Academy of Sciences to work with engineers and governments, becoming the channel in between to understand the policies and visions in different countries, and also where the capitals are going, where the technology are heading. And then in between, how do we bring research to solutions, and how do we reflect where technology is going to new research and vision topics? Sometimes it also touch on new ethics topics, and it also touch on behavior change. For instance, in Milken Institute, when we have our annual conference, we usually bring, you know, maybe a policymaker, a mayor from Indonesia. That's what we did last time. And also entrepreneurs will sit together to understand what are the unaddressed gap and what are the overcrowded fields. One of the very interesting topic I was discussing with colleagues yesterday, for instance, was that all of you probably are very familiar with the concept of fintech. This is such a very hot topic, right? However, as we see, for instance, in African countries, because this context, this concept is so hot, all the new engineers are all jumping on making the same fintech solutions. So the innovation is dropping and the competition is more fierce. Versus in some countries, you can see more intellectual, more wise choices is that the incubators or the investors or countries, they sit together, they see what are the industries that are already overcrowded, and what are the industry, if you look at the country's STI, science, technology, and innovation policies and needs, what are still, unaddressed gaps and the areas that the country need to progress forward? How can we guide capitals and research and Academy of Sciences focus into those areas? So in the way, Academy of Sciences and countries also have to steer engineers and capital to go into new directions. Finally, I want to touch upon my recent experience with the MIT Solve. So MIT has a Solve incubator and marketplace, which is to bring social entrepreneurs to connect with the industrial leaders, with the policy leaders. And so we run we have a leadership panel that would review different proposals and select the best ones that are meeting the sustainable development goals, really helping local contexts, and also have the potential to grow into a big business. From this process, I also learned a lot myself by looking at what are the successful examples. And very interestingly, for instance, we have 10 leaders from McKinsey, from World Bank, from the UN, from also very successful investing firms that supports these social entrepreneurs. So there are some patterns I started seeing clearly. Number one is that the solution nowadays may not be the rocket science, the very fancy pattern, the Elon Musk. We actually discussed, it's probably misleading if everybody is looking at Elon Musk and thinking, the smartest way is to go to the moon. Absolutely not. It could be very local way to address the unmet needs and quickly can be used everywhere. For instance, one of the examples that really impressed me is that using solar panel. So solar panel is not new technology at all, but they designed these packable cases with the medical equipment and using solar panel to make a temporary emergency operating room that has the lights that meet the operation standard and power those medical tools for surgeries. It's such a simple solution using existing technology, but develop the new product that really save people's lives in very challenging environment. The cost is low. The operational model is very clear and that can be scalable very easier. Another example, which I find very interesting, is to say, as we know, ambulance has very high cost. Every time you call ambulance, it comes out and it comes with a huge bill. So have we discovered the inefficiency of having ambulance? Why is it so expensive? And one of the reasons is that an ambulance have all equipment and everything in the ambulance. So a lot of times, let's say if it's woman have an emergency delivery, she probably don't need half of the equipment, but having an ambulance would cost much more for the family and for the public health system. So we see great examples of having a little tuk-tuk. A tuk-tuk has basic, life support, 1 or 2 equipment, and a midwife going with the tuk-tuk, serving as a ambulance that's specific for women having, difficult deliveries or need a delivery support. In that way, you don't need a fancy ambulance and you have a tuk-tuk that can go either pick the woman to the hospital or help the midwife with, some life support equipment. These are very simple and low cost projects, but quickly they scale up in every village, in every suitable setting. So, and also they do not rely on a lot of capital investment and they don't rely on a lot of missing links, meaning you don't need A, B, C, D, F, G, a lot of them. It's just a simple solution that either build on existing technology or refined business model that can make things simpler. There are several areas we were looking at. For instance, there's the caring economy, which I think would have huge potential for the ASEAN region with all the aging population. China just declared and entering into an Asian era, which means there are more kind of elderly people that would need care, that would need health support, that would need emotional support. so on and so forth. So caring economy, how do we apply technology to make the whole Asian population having a better life quality that can range from health support to home care support. Then we also have kind of general healthcare. How do we make a digital health system? We see great examples in Bhutan, in Cambodia, also for agriculture support. Nowadays there's a food security issues also because of regional geopolitical clash. There will be more food security related opportunities for entrepreneurs to think about. How do we modernize agriculture nowadays? It may be, matching farmers to the market. It may be processing food and preserve food from harvest in a more efficient ways. And then we also have something like education and sustainable housing. For instance, for STI solutions, right? If you look at a lot of countries, the education system is still relatively old school. They're teaching old ways of programming, the old ways of very isolated teaching, versus nowadays, programming and holistic thinking. They're progressing so fast. For instance, my own brother is a very prominent engineer, and he tells me almost every 3 months, he has to learn a new coding language. That's how fast the industry is going. So the traditional way of schools may not meet the growing needs of new entrepreneurs. You constantly need to build your new incubators or being supported by incubators. So in this ecosystem, there are a lot of opportunities for STI education or makers lab or incubators that would help even providing from capital markets seed funding to maybe legal consultation to see how do we protect the legal rights, how do we structure this company to have a proper shareholder structure to attract capital markets. So these are just several examples to see there's so many growing areas. Once you look into the opportunities can range from providing services to technologies to business models to maybe just do private and public sector consulting or introducing or help manage projects by collaboration with the UN system. For instance, UNDP has a lot of collaborations on the ground. So monitoring, evaluation, these are also new areas. So my talk today is to really just broadly touch on several topics, and during the Q&A session, maybe if you have questions, we can go further on one of the topics. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Okong. So it's an interesting sharing that you've shared. Think simple, do not think complicated. We used to think that technology advances means we have to, prepare, send someone to the moon, for example. So your example of using very simple existing technology with solar, that we can actually reinvent it in another products or another needs. So it's very interesting on that. So that would give some great insights to especially those who are on the call today. Thank you very much, Ms. Okong. And whoever has any further questions, please do type it in the chat box. Our speaker will take a look at it later at the end of after the three speakers, we will look into the question and answer. All right, thank you very much. Thanks for the inspiration as well. Next, please allow me to introduce our next speaker for today, Dr. Liu Xiaoshan. He is the Asia Chair of IEEE Entrepreneurship. His research focus is actually on autonomous driving technologies and robotics. He received a PhD in computer engineering, a master's in science in biomedical engineering from University of California, Irvine, and Master of Public Administration from Harvard University. He is a senior member of IEEE, a distinguished speaker of IEEE Computer Society, a distinguished speaker of the ACM, the founder of the IEEE Special Technical Committee on Autonomous Driving Technologies, and of course, a fellow of Royal Society for Public Health. Today, Dr. Liu will be bringing a topic in his discussion titled, ASEAN is the next frontier of the global intelligent electric vehicle industry. So without further delay, please allow me to pass the mic to Dr. Liu Dr. Liu, I pass it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Bernard. I will project the screen. I have a very short PowerPoint to share. So let me know if you guys can see it.
Yes, it is projected.
All right.
Yes.
Great. So yeah, the main purpose of today, my talk today, it's basically to introduce actually entrepreneurship to the ASEAN audience. We have a lot of what I call so-called big shot audience today, so that we can communicate more regarding how we can, or how actually we can help boost entrepreneurship in ASEAN nations. Okay, so what is IEEE entrepreneurship? I know Bernard, you're a member of IEEE. Professor Yu is also a member of IEEE. I'm sure a lot of members within AAET are also members of IEEE. It's a global organization with over 400,000 members worldwide. And entrepreneurship, it's an initiative under the IEEE headquarters. Today, we have about 5,000 IEEE members and 15,000 non-IEEE members in IEEE entrepreneurship. So we welcome both members within and outside IEEE. Our goal is to help grow the entrepreneurial activities across the world. So if we take a look at the breakdown today, a lot of the members are aspiring entrepreneurs, meaning that they are about to launch their business, but not yet. They have been thinking a bit about it. And 36% goes to that category, and 28% are early stage startups. And there are a lot of scale or already scaled startups, entrepreneurs, also 12%. And investors are a big part of our community. So we have a lot of members who are seasoned investors, like Ao, the previous speaker. She's also a seasoned investor. So our job is to connect the bridge between technology entrepreneurs as well as investors. We have mentoring programs. So if members within AAET or outside AAET in ASEAN nations, they are interested in launching their own business, we have a lot of programs to share. They're all free. Welcome to check them out. We also have members of entrepreneurship IEEE to mentor different kind of startups. We do a lot of workshops, as Al mentioned. We do quite a bit of social entrepreneurship as well. This one is in Uganda, Africa, that we conducted in 2019. We tend to go around the world and try to encourage people to launch their, either it's social entrepreneurship or more traditional for-profit entrepreneurship. We have a lot of videos that we share on YouTube and so on to connect people, to demystify how to do business. For example, in the United States, there is a grant called Small Business Innovation Research, SBIR. It's a government-funded entrepreneurial grant. So we try to make a lot of informational videos to help people connect to different kind of fundings. Hopefully we can do the same along with AAET to teach people or to help people launch their startups. Women, we encourage a lot of women to participate in entrepreneurial activities. Traditionally, it's a man-dominated world in entrepreneurship, but we see very excellent members like Al and many others who are doing very great in their career stage. We not only encourage women to participate in entrepreneurial activities, but also we provide a lot of help to help them succeed. We have awards each year. So if you are a startup company, you want to enter the world stage, try to enter this competition, we give an award each year. It's called Entrepreneurship Impact Award. The last year's winner, it's a 3D printing companies. So we tend to encourage, especially technology innovations in this field. IEEE is a huge organization. We have a lot of different branches. For example, IEEE Explorer is the portal for accessing different kind of technology publications. Especially for AAET, I think a lot of members and fellows of AAET, they're advanced researchers. We encourage AAET members to publish at IEEE related journals and magazines. I myself are associated with IEEE IT Professional, which is a magazine dedicated to innovation and entrepreneurial activities in IT side. The second one is more on the management side. It's called IEEE Engineering Management Review. So a lot of the entrepreneurial activity within the region can be reported through those journals, and then we can help researchers reach the world stage. Here are the perks for being IEEE members. I'm not going to go over details. A lot of members of AAET themselves are indeed also IEEE members. We have e-learning courses. Feel free to use these kind of material towards your network. If you want to pick up a certificate or entrepreneurship, IEEE is a portal. I think a lot of trainings are free indeed, so that you can connect with global entrepreneurs as well. Intellectual property, it's a big topic today. A lot of innovations would be protected through IP protection agencies throughout the country. I think OWL herself is also associated with a lot of UN IP protection agencies such as WIPO. But within IEEE, we have courses to teach our members how to protect the IP that they generated, so that people cannot rip off what they have developed. Also, digital marketing. Marketing is a big topic. If you have a good product, a lot of times it's very hard to market the product to the right audience. So IEEE also offers a lot of digital marketing solutions. They're all free online. And then if you just want to get in touch with us, you can subscribe to the IEEE Entrepreneurship e-newsletter, which is a very great portal to understand what's going on around the world, what are entrepreneurs doing in Europe, for example, and if that product is suitable for the ASEAN market, whether we can bring it over, and so on and so forth. A lot of opportunity to connect with global entrepreneurs. And then we have a lot of different kind of programs with different IEEE venues. For example, for quantum computing, we have collaboration with the Quantum Week to encourage people to do their startups in quantum computing. Also in communication, we have IEEE 5G World Forum, IEEE IoT, and so on and so forth. Also, at the end, we have IEEE Women in Engineering. As I have mentioned before, it's quite an important topic to encourage more women to participate in entrepreneurial activities. Support programs. If you have any thoughts, you want to go through the IEEE Entrepreneurship Network to broadcast to the world, we have a lot of support programs. Welcome to contact us, such that we can work with you to help you succeed. If you are a company in ASEAN regions, you want to reach the world market, IEEE could be one channel to help you succeed as well. So that's a basic introduction to IEEE entrepreneurship. I want to bring up the topic that IEEE does have a lot to offer, especially to the ASEAN nations, such that hopefully these webinar kick off the first of a series of events. In the future, we can focus on different vertical topics. For example, social entrepreneurship, as Al brought up. For example, medicine, telehealth, and so on, as we have a doctor joining us today, Jason, that we can have a special session just on the topic of healthcare. Myself, I work in the automotive industry. More specifically, I work in autonomous driving. So I just took a trip in ASEAN nations, Singapore, Malaysia, Philippines, Indonesia, and Thailand. It's quite a trip that I learned a lot. And then when I came back, I have written this article that's published on Forbes. I think the next frontier of the global intelligent EV industry is indeed in ASEAN, and I will explain why. This would be just one example of the future of ASEAN's technology market. So 2021, the EV market, it's such a hot topic. I brought up Tesla in her previous talk. And in China, also Tesla is a very hot topic. But EV, if we look at the global market, it's about 9% of all passenger vehicle sales. The main driver today are companies from the United States and China. Very limited number outside of these two big nations. However, what's problematic today, it's as everybody might already know, US and China are not in a very good relationship. So both the OEMs in the United States and the OEMs in China, and even the OEMs in Europe, they need a middle ground to reach each other's market. And then worse than that, we have seen the shortage of ECUs, electronic compute units, control units in the car. the semiconductor shortage. That's why you see recently there's a CHIPS Act in the United States being passed. But if we zoom out a little bit and look at the whole ASEAN nations, at least on the very grand scale, that's what we see. In terms of talent supply, I think Singapore is doing very well, especially in autonomous driving. We see a lot of talents coming out from Singapore. Today, either they go to the United States or some of them come to China. Some of my colleagues actually are from Singapore working on autonomous driving. But there's no local market today for them to work on. And then if we zoom into Malaysia, Malaysia has been a long tradition of doing ECU and semiconductor manufacturing. A lot of people don't even know about it, but Malaysia is a strong point in ECU semiconductor manufacturing. So that would be a base to solve a lot of the ECU supply problems. And then if we look at Indonesia, that's a battery. That's the factory for battery, because they have the the natural resource reserve to sustain the battery business. When I visited Indonesia very recently, the new rules from the government is that Indonesia is not allowed to export raw materials anymore, but they can manufacture batteries over there. And then if we look at Thailand, especially Toyota and a few other major OEMs, they have factories in Thailand. So if you combine all these factors, it's the whole supply chain of the EV business right here in ASEAN. That's why we have seen a lot of Chinese companies and the US companies are going to ASEAN either to make sure that they get a reserve of battery or semiconductor, talents, manufacturing, and so on. A lot of companies are going there to setting up businesses. And beyond that, there's a market. Once the cost gets manufactured, you can export to the world, because as of today, ASEAN is a neutral entity in world politics, such that they don't have conflict with China or US and whatsoever. But what's beyond that? Why do I think entrepreneurship is extremely important in this market? Because I came from information technology background, so I tend to think backward. The previous two generations of information technology is mobile computing and personal computing, meaning PC. If you look at the market size of each, for example, the mobile chip market, the mobile computing market, today it's about $35 billion. It's a huge market, but it enables a market that's $800 billion because there's an ecosystem beyond that. For personal computing, it's a similar story. The chip market itself is $55 billion per year, but it enables an ecosystem that's $900 billion big. So anytime you launch a product, that product will enable an ecosystem that's 20 times as big as its product. We have seen this. If you think about cell phone, your mobile phone, if you go back 15 years, I bet you guys had a Nokia phone. Back then, it's only a $10 billion market because there was no ecosystem. A phone was just a phone. But today, if you look at the phone market, it's $800 billion market because there are a lot of applications around the phone. The same logic applies to the car business. Although what you see is a car, but there are a lot of applications you can develop on top of the car ecosystem. And particularly in the past few years, there are a lot of successful global startups in ASEAN, such as Grab, SEA, JobStreet, Gojek. I can go on and go and so on and so forth. And then more recently, there's a VinFast from Vietnam that's doing EV. That's why I believe we are at the dawn of the rise of the ASEAN technology market, and that's why it's a good timing for IEEE to come together with AAET along with the help of the United Nations. Let's incubate this market to the next stage. So concluding sentence, technology entrepreneurship is needed to boost ASEAN economy. Hopefully together we can achieve something great. Thank you so much. Bernard, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I was muting myself earlier. Okay, so thank you very much, Dr. Liu, for your interesting topic on the next generation of frontiers, especially in ASEAN countries. You know, we have a huge potential in this area. And one area that you introduced, basically there are other things that we could also develop into as well. And each ASEAN country, a nice chart that you just presented earlier, that each ASEAN country would have unique area that we can actually focus on. And that basically makes ASEAN a global area that, into a particular technology that we can embark into. So thank you very much. So those who have joined us, do put your questions into the chat box. Our speaker will take a look at it and answer it. And some of the questions I will bring it up during the panel discussion. So without further delay, please let me introduce our third speaker for today. We have Mr. Goh Peng Ooi for Silverlake Group, founder and executive chairman. And it's in great honor that we have him here today as our third speaker. Mr. Goh actually has an impressive portfolio that we have today. And please allow me to share a little bit about him before we start his talk for today. Mr. Goh Peng Ooi is an AAET Fellow, a Silverlake Group founder and executive chairman. Goh Peng Ooi has been working on mathematical and digital science since 1977. After graduating with a Bachelor of Engineering, majoring in electronics engineering on a Monbushu scholarship at the University of Tokyo. He began his career in IBM Malaysia, where he held several senior positions over a 9-year tenure, and the last being marketing manager for banking and finance. So basically, he is also in 1989, he founded Silverlake Group, which was based on his foresight on the future of economic and digital demands. So I'm sure that his experience, foresights in that will be able to share with a lot of us today. Within the first 10 years, Silverlake established itself as a leading provider of state-of-the-art universal banking solution. Today, the group is a multi-billion-dollar organization with key offices around the globe, and some of its members, company listed on various stock exchanges. So the group original tagline, Symmetry at Work, was recently revised to Symmetry at Work, powering hundreds of deep tech and new tech companies to reflect not only supply side of the economy, but also demand side, such as fintech, digital finance, cloud computing, digital franchising, and other various high-tech areas. The Silverlake Group underwent a major restructuring exercise in 2021, and Goh founded Zest FundQ Pte. Limited, a company incorporated in Singapore. That consolidates all of his interests in the group, as well as to have better focus on symmetry and digital economy. So basically, Goh has also won twice the Ernst & Young's Entrepreneur of the Year Award Malaysia, recognizing entrepreneur excellence, first in 2005, and then second in 2014. The World Chinese Economic Summit in 2015 presented a Lifetime Achievement Award for Excellence in Information Technology to Goh. In 2017, he was conferred the ASEAN Legacy Award in ASEAN Business Awards, which recognize ASEAN entrepreneurs that have created positive impact and inspiration within ASEAN communities. Most recent in 2019, at the ASEAN Community Leadership and Partnership Forum in 2019, Goh was the sole recipient of ASEAN Entrepreneur of the Year Award bestowed to distinguished business personalities who have contributed significantly to ASEAN. And lately in 2022, the Emperor of Japan conferred the prestigious Order of the Rising Sun, Gold Race with Rosette on Goh. And in 2015, article about Silverlake, Forbes conferred Goh as the first tech billionaire in Malaysia. So Goh is also a fellow of Academy of Science Malaysia, an industry advisor of the Lee Kong Chian Faculty of Engineering and Science in Utah, a fellow of ASEAN Academic Engineering Technology, a member of ASM Science and Technology and Industrial Linkage Committee, a member of ASEM's advisor of the ACCIM Science Technology and Innovation Committee, a member of the Board of Governors of First City University College, a member of Azman Yashim, the Advisory Council of University Technology Malaysia, and advisor for Japan Graduates Association of Malaysia, Executive Committee of Malaysian-Japan Economic Association, Executive Council member of the Economic Club of Kuala Lumpur, and a member of International Advisory Council of the Association of Malaysia Economics Undergraduates. Mr. Goh today will bring a topic for his talk today, a brief talk on mathematics of economics, economy, and economy of mathematics with application. So without further delay, please allow me to pass over Mr. Goh for his talk for our as a third speaker for today. Mr. Goh, I pass over to you.
Hi, good afternoon. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Mr. Goh.
Okay, yes. Then I will share a screen first. Can you all see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes,
maybe
we can.
Put it in the slideshow.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, now I need to move this bar that is blocking me. Now, okay, I choose this topic called Economy of Mathematics and Mathematics of Economy. And obviously, it's a very headache topic. In fact, I like to torture myself. It took me quite some time to think how to start discussing a topic of such abstract nature. Now, let's see why we need to do this. Now, well, why should we go so deep into fundamentals? It is because the world is changing, and in economic sense, everything is fundamentally changed. So Keynesian, the various schools like Chicago or Malaysian and so on and so forth, they really can cover only a corner of the economic thoughts that we face today. And we know fail to learn is actually fail to plan, and fail to plan is plan to fail. And success is about planning, which is called vision. Of course, then next is execution, and there's no such thing as easy job, and I'll show you why. Now, well, entrepreneurship can be born. So if a person is born a hero, it's okay, be a hero. But then many of us are born specialized in certain boxes. And there this concept called mathematical boxes, which won several few medals in the last 10 years. And I will introduce some of the authors. And if possible to think in mathematical boxes, then of course your accuracy increases. Now, so collaboration is a possibility when we are not born heroes. But of course, it is always simple that the most important thing is to be objective and honest to ourselves. And it's also important to know that so-called mathematical boxes, they are actually complex numbers, and they could be infinite complex. They are not just simple complex. That means A plus IB. It could be many IJK and so on. It could go, all IJK can actually go into infinity. And that can be a very complex waveform. And that explains why in our language, there's such thing called false positive and why false negatives. So actually, it's very important to review what you think is true every once a while and to calibrate, the strategy. So I have been thinking how to really make sense out of this talk, and I would like to talk about Nancy Pelosi's visit and see whether it makes some sense to talk about mathematical boxes. Now we know if we are Chinese educated, we know there's Sanzi, Sun Tzu, and in Goh Mo Pian actually it talks about, well, law of engagement, and that is the lowest is actually committing to war, and confrontation the second last, and negotiation is actually third, and the best is win by more. And this more, I have been trying to translate this word more for a long time. I would actually say it is maybe nearly tested wisdom, time-tested wisdom. maybe that would be the closest translation of Mo. And Mo, and a lot of people read Sanzi as though it is just a book. Sanzi is not just a book. It is actually all about Mo. And so Mo is not just about Sanzi. So if you look at Lao Tzu actually talk about, well, 骄兵必败, which means if you're arrogant, you belittle your enemy, most likely you're going to be defeated. And 哀兵必胜, and then under the same conditions, the army that is most angry actually wins. And that was actually written before Sanzi. So therefore, actually, Sanzi is not just a book. It's about Mo, and the word Mo must have existed during Sanzi's time. Otherwise, how can he use this word? And you can see that in Lao Tzu, there are so many Mo's in Lao Tzu, right? So, and that predates Sanzi. And of course, if you move forward, move a bit later to San Guo, then you have this 处事有名, 处其不意, 攻其不备, 声东击西, 志在必得, and so on. And that, if you combine all this, you find that what actually Chinese did in this case is exactly following Sanzi, Lao Tzu, and the San Guo. And finally, well, everyone was talking, and I told them, well, finally, 丢了面子，赢了理智 actually is okay, you know. Now, so entrepreneurship maybe is actually very much about Mo. In fact, everything is actually about Mo if you can expand that to mathematical boxes. Now, so what is Mo, and how can we formalize? In mathematics, we like to formalize things so that we are not talking about nonsense, because actually the theory of category theory was actually called theory of nonsense during the beginning. And that was 1941, and it lasted around 35 years. The mathematician actually debated whether it is actually a valid mathematics, and it took about 35 years. Now, so the thing is, if we look at reality, there are two ways of looking at reality. And one is called collapsing the reality, and mathematics collapse reality. Okay. Now, and how you collapse reality actually is actually based on our primitive intelligence or based on innate intelligence. So mathematicians, like artists, like musicians, they are actually born. Now, what we know about mathematical professors, they are actually filling in the evidences. They learn mathematics. They actually cannot grasp the actual original, the true fundamental meaning of mathematics. Now, that is a line that you have to cross. And one side is collapsing the reality, the other side is filling in the evidences. Now, unfortunately, this whole thing goes in circle. So if you read history of mathematics, you find that actually it goes in circle. That is the collapsing of reality that leads to the filling in of evidences. So when mathematics started, we don't know. But the first record of mathematics was by Thales. So that was 2,600 years ago. Now those are records. Those are not mathematics. Okay, mathematics originated since time unknown. A human being tying knobs, and they actually use knob as numbers. So it's a kind of record. Right. So one point about entrepreneurship is to understand that we could be misled by our education. Now, it's very important to pause, step back, okay, and relearn and see whether we are actually misled by our education. For example, in the case of Nancy Pelosi, I think she was misled by her education. So without able to read the next move. Now, so, well, let's see what is the basis of talking about mathematical boxes or more. In 2014, Martin Harrer won a Fields Medal. Now, his theory was basically called theory of regularity structures. Well, just call it mathematical boxes. I think that would be easier. Otherwise, is nearly impossible to read. But that is the basis of collapsing the rarity. Why? Because in mathematics, there are a lot of singularity points that you have to cross, and they block you everywhere. For example, you draw a circle. The boundary itself is the biggest headache because you really don't know where the boundary belongs. Does the boundary belongs to the circle, or the circle belongs to the boundary belongs to the unknown? Now we don't know, right? So those are the boundary conditions. But how to differentiate across boundary condition? And that would be the challenge, right? And that was solved by Martin Harrer, and he got the prize field medal in 2014. That is actually the basis, but frankly, I doubt anyone can read this paper. So it's easier to summarize the equations that are useful to us. And that was why I did summarize all the equations on the right side. And if you're interested, you can actually go and discover them. There are long stories to tell on each equation. You can actually give a lecture on each equation. So the next thing is, of course, and on application, that Dennis Sullivan actually also won a Nobel Prize just this year. And his work, actually, it was made based on mathematical boxes. Now, I want to correlate mathematical boxes with Chinese mold. It has a very close relationship. And why I want to do that is because finally, whether it's entrepreneurship, whether it's economy, whatever it is about competition. Right? It's in economy, it's called a comparative advantage. Right? Then it's David Ricardo, right? And comparative advantage. Now, so if you can't win, then you can't win. Right? So it's very important to know whether you can win. And so in details, for example, why are we not talking about ASEAN? Why are we not talking about China? The truth is, all of them are mathematical boxes, and to have a rigorous or serious discussion, we need to break them down. Now, ASEAN could be Malaysia, could be Singapore, and even Malaysia could be broken down. And so it depends on whether a topic is actually horizontal or whether a topic is vertical. Sometimes if it is a vertical topic, frankly, if you go into just touching on the surface, it's actually really a waste of time. So now we are born with two types of instinct. One is to learn, and the other one is to discover. So when we look at this picture, well, the discovery could be a lot of stories. When you look at the knob, it's so many things. It could be a rope for the seafarers. It could be a knob to remember 3 numbers. And everything that you look at, it's a lot of stories, and it's a lot imagination for us. And how we apply this imagination, well, you need creativity, you need the ability to also look at the rarity. And filling in the rarity today is much easier than the old days. And that is, you actually just need to consult Dr. Google. And Dr. Google will have a lot of facts to fill up the rarity, and you can actually do fact checks across internet. So that makes filling in the rarities maybe much easier than my time. When I tried to borrow a paper from Harvard, it took me 6 months when I was in University of Tokyo. And today I just need to hit an enter key. And why I talk about mathematical boxes is because we tend to read a lot, yet we don't ask actually what we benefit from reading a lot. Okay, and for example, this book, Rethinking Competitive Advantage, of course, I can just summarize it and give a talk, but I'm just wondering how much value it has. Now, I would rather focus on the fundamental issues, the fundamental methods that can solve most of the problems that we actually faces. Now, let's talk about how collapsing the reality in our real life, since we are mostly academics, it will be quite easy, because we know that when we talk about number one, actually we draw a circle around, we created a box, and then we box the thing. And that box, if it contains one identity, it is actually called one. Right? So we are boxing things. Counting is actually about boxing things. And then we thought that we only box things during counting. Not true. We box everything. All our thinking processes are boxing. So you look at even characters, we box out the sound, we box out the character, and how we box the character is very different. And ABC is one way of boxing the character, and the Chinese character, which is called pictogram, is another way of boxing the characters. And they are actually fundamentally different, and they cause you to think differently. Now, these are very important, because that explains why Chinese educated think differently from the English educated, because of this fundamental difference. And the true and false, of course, are boxed. And then, of course, if you go a bit further, is accounting. Accounting was invented by this guy called it's a Pochilio. Okay, his surname is Luca Pochilio. Now, which is a Portuguese that traveled to Venice, and he actually recorded the accounting in 1494. And until today, it is still the same principle that we apply. In mathematics, we call it G2. Okay, and architecting is collapsing the reality from a real something. We actually break into drawing. It involves a lot of mathematics. Okay, the measurements, and of course, in measurements are actually breaking down things, and of course, if you go further, all the electronic samplings and so on, we talk about the Shannon sampling, and today, of course, it's all Fourier. It's just a special Fourier here and there, whether it's virtual reality and so on, or metaverse. They are fundamentally Fourier. They are not. There's nothing, no surprises in there. There's nothing complicated, but it's how you apply, how long it takes you to so-called build up the reality. So what is metaverse? Metaverse is just a continuation of virtual reality. You just build up a bigger reality. You call it metaverse. Now, so without knowing all this, it can get actually very confusing. Read too many books. Finally, you don't know what to do. Okay, and so but what about management? Management is actually about game theory. Now, and game theory, of course, is the most generic game theory is the Nash non-cooperative game theory. As expressed, it is actually a series of matrices, but cage in tuple, and tuple is a mathematical heading. Now, of course, it actually means mathematical boxes. So if you look at the management, actually, if you look at this equation, then the things that you have to worry about are, of course, the coefficients, the variables, and types are very important. And you apply the wrong technique to a different type, you are guaranteed to fail. And for example, Malaysian market, Singapore market, Indonesia market, and so on and so forth. Now, and all this, you must have the discipline, mental discipline, to separate out the types, so that you have the most efficient analysis of the problem, and then you actually can hit on the nail and achieve success. Now, and finally, it has to be 审时度势量势而为. Actually, finally, you have to know yourself. It's very important to know yourself, how much you can eat, and how much you are willing to eat. Because not necessarily you want to be super rich. And if you do not want to commit to that, then well, you have to size down your ambition. So the next thing is how digital world actually maps to this so-called mole and mathematical boxes is actually because of something called partitioning. 1 and 0 effectively draw partitions all over the places. Using 1 and 0, there's no such thing as ambiguity. It's either 1 or 0, or a set of 1 or a set of 0, or a mix of 1 and 0, and so on. It's actually very clear. Whether it's about sound, whether it's about colors, they are actually extremely clear. Okay, and that is actually, now, not knowing the fundamental reason why those are so important, in fact, it is also the reason why you can't capture the market. Now, another thing, today, things are changing. You know, money, we talk of M1, M2, M3, and so on and so forth, actually is as simple as they are just derivatives of barter trades. Now, what you mean by derivatives, they are actually mathematical boxes. So if you look at Martin Harrer, he talks about derivatives. His work is all about derivatives. Okay, but derivatives, of course, the good thing about derivatives is they are layered. So you can actually start with first derivative, second derivative, but money, actually, you don't go very far. In fact, money is actually relatively simple in the eyes of mathematics. But the problem is we are taught wrong by all the economists. You know, they make it so complex that our brain can't think. Now, finally, money is not complex at all. And overprinting of money, for example, in the case of USA, well, you print money, you are just borrowing money. Nothing simple as that. You print money, you're borrowing money. And if you allow the money to flow out as a reserve, you are going to have deficit. That's called thriving dilemma. That's given. You know, I mean, if you have money reserve in China, that means China lend you money first. Number two, you must have a deficit. If not, why the money goes there, right? I mean, these are all common sense. You will see, look at it from a very simple point of view. Instead of reading thousands of books and can't even get to a conclusion. Now, and okay, let's talk about application. You know, actually, I identified in IBM in 1998 that, sorry, hardware business is no more a good business. And of course, it's in fact 1986, and I was attending advanced management class, so-called training school, and talking to some of the top executives. But the problem was, when you are doing well, you don't think, and they thought they are infallible. And I thought it's about time to go, because Jiao Ping Pi Pai, you know, which is simple. Right, so I thought, being Chinese educated, weird thinking, talking nonsense, the first BSS most likely is me. So I said, instead of waiting for a BSS, why not I fire myself? Now but luck has always a role in your life, and I was in charge of banking. Good enough, I saw a lot of money in the bank, and I knew banking structure is actually group theory. Of course, that is basically layers of category theory. So the layer 1 is called group theory. And I designed a banking solution that actually is capture the whole ASEAN, make the first billion. And from there, of course, I start doing research myself and dedicate a lot of work to all my CEOs. Today, well, I still get involved in designing, but my main job is actually in charge of the Silverlake fund. It's called Jazz Fund, which is basically investing. Now, so we are in every areas of businesses. So if you look at banking, we are covering all types of banking, you know, Web3 banking, so on and so forth. Now, all long stories. Now, even one subject called Web3 is a long story. So it's actually impossible today in today's world to present digital economy just in 20 minutes. It's impossible. Web3 alone can take you hours. And it's hidden here as one bracket. you know, and so you can see how complex the world has been. And without a clean mind, a clear mind, an organized mind, you actually, it's impossible to run your own business. Right. So what we have not really achieved a lot is actually the demand side, fund side, and the system side. Now, of course, fund, when we talk about fund, we don't talk about 1 billion or 2 billion. We are talking about multiple billions, hundreds of billions. And of course, that we are quite far away from hundreds of billions. So that is one subject that we are talking to international fund. And what we use the fund for is to invest in all the new startups, of course, merger and acquisitions. Now, then it becomes very important to know whether people know whether they are doing the right thing, whether there's a future in what they do. Now, this suddenly you need a very clear mind, and you can box them up. Now, you box them up, you ask the right questions. If they cannot answer the questions, means you should not invest. Now, if you want to cover the whole of the economy, now, again, you can box them up, your supply side, demand side, fund side, system side, technology side, and data side. Now, you look at Donald Reagan actually talked about supply side. Same problem, because they were focusing on supply side, but actually, the later people actually changed to the demand side. Now, there is no way you can print money and focus on supply side. There's no way. And so you are basically contradicting yourself. Now, that was 1972 that they started printing money. And of course, printing money is borrowing money. And it's not really a problem borrowing money. If you are big businesses, if you don't borrow money, you are actually not a big business. So borrowing money is actually not an issue. But is it? But are you investing the right thing? And of course, they are lucky. They are extremely lucky, because 1972 is also the year very large integrated circuit was invented. Why I say that they are lucky? Because very large integrated circuit was not recorded as their GDP in 1972. Now, in their GDP line, there's no such thing as BLSI in 1972. So the whole GDP of USA has never had the starting point of very large integrated circuit, but it is the very large integrated circuit that actually supports the electronic cars, the Mendes car, the internet, the missiles, the direct communications, and so on. It's all very large integrated circuit. Now, why are they coming out with the chip bill? Well, it's because it's so important, right? And what that means, you invested in chip, you make a lot of money, then of course, borrowing money is not a problem. But today, going forward, now, it's a very simple question asking USA. You print money, where you want to invest in? Chips, you have huge competition, right, from everywhere, right? You try to stop China, I doubt you can. Now, being a person who simulated chip, yeah, while my degree is in electronic, actually it's between nuclear physics and electronic. Actually, I simulate the chips. Now, it's a way to do theoretical things, yet get an engineering degree. And that is called simulation. Now, because of, at that time, I was worried about, not having a job. Now, again, I want to sum it out and say, well, if I go back to when I was in school, the first thing that I worried was getting a job. So you can see the way we plan. When I talk to my professor, I give them 25 options. That how am I going to plan out? And they actually introduced me to UPenn to teach, but by coincidence, I joined IBM. Now life changed, so all the simulations actually flip-flop, and we really can't tell, but we can only make it more accurate. And that the way to make it more accurate is actually learn how to use the mathematical boxes, or if we do not know the working behind the mathematical boxes, at least box them up. I always tell my board not to talk so long, but summarize in one sentence. I say, if you cannot summarize in one sentence, that means your brain are not thinking. You're just drifting on and on. Okay, I would like to sum up, and the summary is actually mathematical boxes. To understand it well, actually you read all the Chinese Chenyi. In fact, they are all mathematical boxes. And that would give you a very good picture of how to be a good entrepreneur. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Goh. Great insights into your presentation. Lots of things, how you take a look from the mathematical standpoint on how business runs. So thank you very much. We do have a lot of questions that in the chat box. We are now arrived at the panel discussion. We have about a couple of minutes. So before we actually goes into the panel discussion, let me share a little bit on some of the questions that was posted in the chat box for various speakers. Just allow me, maybe, do you mind, Mr. Goh, that you could unshare?
I'm trying to, how to stop shares. Stop shares. Okay, yeah, I got it.
Yes, that's right. Good, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So let me just quickly share. I've actually typed up the questions in so that I can share with everyone. Okay, can you all see the questions? All right. So the first question was from Dr. Liu. Questions for Ms. Au. What are the topic social entrepreneurship opportunities you see in ASEAN? So I know that she have actually typed it up. So maybe I just post it up. Then maybe Ms. Au could actually elaborate on your question, the answers that you posted.
Yes, so this is a list not, exclusive. I'm just listing some of the top areas that came up on my mind. Number one, agriculture sector, because we know, ASEAN countries are the food storage and food producer for Asia region and beyond. So agriculture sector is actually, there are many aspects to think about, from linking farmers to market, as I mentioned, to post-harvest preservation and production, to maybe using fintech for farmers to be paid in advance or paid with digital vouchers. So it's a whole ecosystem around agriculture sector. Number one, education sector. I think one of the participants asked, saying in Malaysia, young people are less interested in STI education. What can we do? I think people are interested in things that, especially young people, that would bring promise to their education, to their, job opportunities. As I mentioned in my talk, in a lot of countries, not just in Malaysia, it's a universal challenge for young people to see the STI education they have is out of date. It's not really matching the modern needs, and it's not demand driven. A lot of times it's based on, teaching you the basics of coding language without knowing why, and without knowing how to apply in real life job applications. So in that way, I see in a lot of countries, a lot of entrepreneurs start doing vocational training for STI solutions. If you look at early time in China, when technology and programming just happening, there are a lot of vocational training companies. Now they become top public listed companies in a way that they complement informal education system and also provide, a lot of times you can link maybe companies' needs. This is what one of the projects I'm doing, for instance, with some of the Turkish company, to see if they are growing internationally. They usually have a shortage of STI professionals nowadays, guaranteed. So how do we link the company's specific needs to training that would promise jobs for the young graduates? And then in this way, there are many different models for vocational training, right? You can have more hands-on makers lab. You can have a improved syllabus for education. You can maybe have the Academy of Sciences producing some degree program that, even with the IEEE can have some kind of invention. So this is one area. Transportation, Dr. Liu mentioned, smart vehicles or low-cost special applicable vehicles. One example I see was, how nowadays with aging population and people with chronic diseases, diabetes, for instance, they need special vehicles to bring them to hospitals. As the young generation are busy working, they have less time to take care of the elderly, or people in their family have diseases to drive them back and forth. So you can have, I've seen that in the US and some countries expanding special apps for medical vehicles that pick up people for regular checkups, follow-up checkups, cancer checkup and surgery, pick up and drop off. It's basically similar to the Uber app, but having special applicable vehicles, which is a very great business model I see. That also links to the health sector. Health sector, there are many aspects when we look at especially least developed countries and Asian countries. The health sector, lacking of digital ID for patients, doctor appointment app that are really picking up momentum. Their caring economy for aging societies and digital infrastructure for the medical system to connect medical records with the operations, with supplies and procurement, for instance. The final two, energy sector, solar, wind, and how do they really apply through even small apps, through hardware and software, and how do they mainstream into the whole business sector. Last one example, e-commerce logistics. For instance, I know the founder of Grab very well when he started. He came back from the US and learning from Alibaba's experience, and see we can duplicate exactly the same experience in ASEAN with adjustment and modification of the context. What works in China may necessarily work in Indonesia, and you need to adopt to local context. But if you're entrepreneurs and scientists from the local context, it's much easier for you to figure out what works out. As you can see from some of the successful examples in China, Amazon is not as successful as Alibaba. Is it because Alibaba has better technology, or because they know the local culture, they know the logistics, they know the regulations and policies and competition? So I think that also linked to my former point, which is operational model, marketing model, legal, as the whole package that Dr. Liu also mentioned that IEEE would like to support you to utilize those package to hone your business competitiveness will be very important. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Ong. So let me pose the second question. I think it is also goes to Ms. Ao Kong as well. This is about the question that you just brought out about STI. And I think the questions it also targeted towards STEM, where sadly the interest in this education area in a lot of countries, and of course Malaysia not exclusive of it, they have actually less people are actually embarking onto STEM. So, I mean, any comments on you? I mean, you did mention partially about vocational, specific target courses to meet the demand. Any comments onto this point, Ms. Ao?
Yes, so thank you for the question. As I mentioned, I think education has to be, opening your horizon, but especially STEM education has to be practical, that, students find them useful to lead them somewhere, not just based on theories, because they also have to earn their bread and butter, right? So I think the main challenge in building business in this area is how do you configure a business model? For instance, when I was looking at examples in Pakistan, how do you differentiate the market? There are poor students who want to study STEM very well, but they cannot afford. There are richer students who can afford, but do they have access or computers, or do they need more specialized program? In Turkey, for instance, our technology bank was looking at the Makers Lab model and try to duplicate in Niger, which is the least developed countries. That's more hands-on model, because for that context, for students to experience and having hands-on experience with the 3D printing and so on and so forth, it's more practical for them to get into workforce quickly, versus if you're in a different context, people need more updated programming skill, then these has to be, mainstreamed in STEM education. So in conclusion, is look at where the needs are in that country and what is the, even the money charging business model, and how do you bring access to people? Do they do online? Do they get a certificate? Do you match them for job opportunities? And in this process, I really believe Academy of Sciences as AAET could play a very important role to guide these entrepreneurs to see where the gaps are and how can they build a business based on needs.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, so our information officer just posted some information about Technology Makers Lab. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So all of you, just take a look at the chat box. I think Miss Cheng has actually posted the links there on the Technology Makers Lab. Do copy it up in the link. And finally, there's one last question that came from PTC Romy. Ms. Alcong, is the United Nations has a template for agriculture sector entrepreneurship?
So to answer that question, the UN don't have a template for any sector entrepreneurship. That's because I believe any development solution entrepreneurship have to come from people who live and work in the context. It has to come from demand. What the UN does sometimes is being a knowledge broker, such as what I'm doing now, is to share what great examples I see and maybe what works in one context can be duplicated in another context. But we have some good examples. For instance, I think from Cambodia, from Laos, on some of the agriculture entrepreneurship they did. Also, we're in the process of preparing a knowledge hub based on some of the successful MIT examples, entrepreneurship examples that we summarize. So if you want, maybe we can also share the newsletter with your audiences and participants, so they can maybe get some inspiration from not only agriculture sector, but other sectors. How do they succeed? How do they become successful? And what's their operational model? Would that work?
Yeah. So I think PTC Romy is actually from Philippines. So maybe he could link up and communicate further and see whether he could, something that he could prepare something for Philippines as well. I mean, if that was the question being targeted. So you can reach out to Miss Ao as well, Romy.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. I will get in touch with Alcom.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. All right, so we have actually got all the answers that is posted on the chat box as of today. There is no further questions. Is there anybody that would like to have a verbal questions instead of on the chat box? If you do have, just raise your arm and we could basically, unmute and verbally ask the question to any of our three speakers as well. They are online. We have Ms. Ao Kong, we have Dr. Liu, and as well as Mr. Goh online as well.
Oh, I actually have a very short question for Mr. Goh, as he gave a very interesting framework to model not only business, but also politics dynamic change. So Mr. Goh, the time has changed a bit now that we are entering a new era. As from my perspective, we are in the era of more technology-driven economy. How would the box model work in this context?
Well, the interesting part about mathematics is actually all mathematics are in waveforms, and we know A plus IB is actually a circle. So and everything come in waveforms. So and nothing is so-called perfect. So therefore, there's no way you can compose anything that is only one identity. And if you can, that would be God, right? So therefore, the minimal composition, it means you will try to put things together and you try to do it whichever way and compose them. The minimal you can get is basically the so-called White-Thompson theorem, which comes in 2 layers, or it comes in 3, which is Burnside theorem, or it comes in 6, which is Fisher theorems. Now, these are all with conditions. Why 2, 3, 6 is each of them have different conditions. Now, let's see economy. Economy definitely is breaking into two layers. Now, the West, the G7 is trying to drive their own initiatives, but the truth is the South, or the so-called South, or now today, represented by Shanghai Initiative or BRICS. These are actually the South countries. Now they have their own interests. They actually quite a lot of common interests, even though India and China are quarreling over the borders, but they have a lot of common interests in terms of monetary policies. And nobody likes US way of printing money, then raise interest rate, and then after that, shrink their balance sheet, create inflations. Everyone got hit. So US sneezes and everyone catch a cold. Now nobody likes that. Nobody likes to catch a cold, right? So you can see that China had outpaced their own economy, and they call it the Shuangjian or whatever, which is basically phasing out the economy from the US economy, right? So if US go up, they actually intentionally bankrupt their companies, and you see that they actually have bankrupted many companies in the last 5-6 years, which means all this US dollar debt, which could be amounting to 1 trillion, are now all so-called, we call it haircuts, which means you pay 5%, 6%, and that would be a fantastic way of managing debt, right? But if enterprise debts fail, it shouldn't affect the country. But the truth is, if you are in face with US, you are not ready to do anything. The US will crush you. Okay, and you have seen in 1997, where Indonesia was collapsed, Suharto was overthrown, even Malaysia, Mahathir was nearly overthrown, and many leaders are overthrown in 1997. Even Gorbachev, Russia was effectively because of 1997. When you create a financial crisis, US only sneezes, everyone catch a cold. But when the country catch a cold, the people blame the leaders. And that's a very easy way of changing leaders. Now that patterns, of course, nobody likes it, right? And when you play too many rounds, game is actually very simple. Don't play too many rounds. The people learn. Okay. Now you can see India is trying not to play the game. Russia is not playing the game. China is not playing the game. Turkey doesn't want to play the game. Argentina doesn't want to play the game. Iran doesn't want to play the game. So many people don't want to play the game. And there are 40 countries linking up in BIS, exchanging basically, using renminbi and so on and so forth. No, there are many things that are happening today that's going to cause the world going into a parallel economy where there are two phases. Means the timing of the crash is actually outpaced. Means not the same. And that means you make your own economy independent, and which of course China, India, Russians are very happy to do that. And so that is one big issue, because that means from now on you have to brand the market as Chinese or the South market and the G7 market. You really have to brand it that way now. There are two different markets, okay? And all the risks and the opportunities are actually linked to this separation of economies. So this is a very big change, even from monetary point of view, from economic point of view, even from supply side point of view. There's so many things that is going to change. Okay, and of course the other one is about chip technology. Now, since we are talking about digital sciences, right, the way we fabricate chips may change, and if we change, the cost change. So one of the possibility is basically overlapping of chips, which China has successfully done it, Huawei has done it, Apple has done it, Intel has done it. Now, but you see, when you overlap the chips, the cost is completely different from fabricating new. Okay, so and this we don't know. We don't know what is going to be the impact to the supply side, because actually the so-called going for a 5 nanometer, 3 nanometer, 2 nanometer is actually very engineering oriented. It's not application oriented. You may not need the 2 nanometer. How many people really understand that your phone needs 2 nanometer? I don't even care what nanometers in my phone. I don't even know. As a person who play with chips, I don't even know. I don't even care. So how can that be important to me when I don't care, right? And that is very frightening, because consumer may not care. And when there are alternatives that can be very damaging to USA, we don't know this. We really don't know. But of course, US is definitely very worried that the passing of the bill, 280 billion US dollar, 52 billion subsidies, and so on. Of course, it explains why US are so worried. But nobody knows. In fact, it's extremely difficult to calculate, what will happen, because you need too many parameters. Right? But we know that things are going to separate out. There are going to be huge economic impacts of how applications are built. Definitely affects entrepreneurship, because there are people going to be going bankrupt because of this. Right? So there are a lot of top-down parameters that the entrepreneurs must know. Okay, and that's the reason why I talk about mathematical boxes and hope that create awareness that people leap before they look before they leap. Otherwise, they thought they are leaping into a beautiful swimming pool. Actually, it could be something else. Okay, okay, and that is a simple answer to your question.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for the insight. Hopefully, one day we can see a book from you to explain the concept.
Okay, thank you.
There are many books on this, but there are many published books, but they are all mathematical books, and they are not friendly at all. Like, for example, you talk about feature theorem. There's a book called Three Transposition Theory by Professor Obache. And in the first page, he already says that you need a PhD and equivalent in mathematics. So that effectively rule out a lot of people.
Definitely.
So the first page already told you not to read if you don't have that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Goh. So now we are coming to the end of the session now. Maybe what I would request, is it possible that we have about 1 or 2 minutes for our speaker to basically have the closing remarks, just 1 or 2 minutes to actually give an insights on today's topic, and so that we also can bring forth the next seminar. We hope that this session is a series of sessions. I hope that all of you could participate in the next series that we're going to cover on this particular topic. So firstly, please allow me to get Ms. Au to provide the first closing remark. 1 to 2 minutes.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you all for today's opportunity. I'm very impressed by the enthusiasm and the intellectual exchange today. For me, I think today I touched a lot of different topics that ranging from the Sustainable Development Goals to different operations and business models and context-driven and demand-driven approaches that entrepreneurs could think. There are also examples and mental models to tap into, but basically to see that technology entrepreneurship is not, again, flying to the moon or having the most breathtaking intervention, but it could be, a different modification on existing technology or refined business model that's based on scalability and feasibility. So I encourage all of you to think broadly, to have to start small, and be hopefully build into a big empire like Dr. Ong did. And don't forget your philosophy, your Sun Tzu, and your strategy when you're growing your business. That's what grounds you and give you more energy. So for next webinar, I also hope to participate and learn from all of you. I think we can specifically also talk about capital markets, having investment and attract investors, having a full structure and pattern and exit strategy. I found this is missing knowledge and asked by a lot of entrepreneurs. So I just wish that AAET, having all our distinguished guests and enthusiastic participants, will continue this journey together, working closely with the IEEE to come up with more solutions and more for, as Dr. Ong said, a great more that comes from brainstorming and the solidarity. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Ong, for the closing remark. Next, could we have Dr. Liu for your closing remarks before we end?
Oh, definitely. So first, thank you very much for organizing this. So I have just one remark. When you try to start a business or try to connect with business in ASEAN, think IEEE and how IEEE can help. Hopefully, this is only the first one of a series of entrepreneurial workshops that we have in ASEAN countries. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Liu. And also, Mr. Goh, could I have your closing remarks for the participants for today? Thank you.
Yeah, well, as you have seen, that I focus on the word mathematical boxes, and they are very language now, because Dennis Sullivan actually used that word in his Nobel Prize speech. So now that is a very important word, because at least we can see something is a box. Now, so the highest box, we can actually call it God. I'm not Christian, I'm not Buddhist, but well, you can actually use the word God. The reason why is because you need to see an order. Now in physics, now order is very important. Without order, there is no laws of physics, right? So the word order, but the order is just a generic word. How are you going to actually quantify it or formalize it? Now in category theory, is formalized as sigma dot 1F equal to sigma. So that is basically how God is defined in category theory, and they call it a natural transformation. And in computer science, they call it okay, I couldn't remember. I only remember the symbol because it's a Greek word, and I couldn't remember the pronunciation. Now, okay, so it's actually very important to see top down. That always believe there is an order. There is no such thing as humanly complex, impossible to solve problems. The problems is not solvable, it's because of our limit, not because God made it insolvable. We can't leave the earth. Okay? It's because of our own limit, because we have not discovered the way out yet. Right? So entrepreneurship is in that sense a lot of respect for natural forces, and a lot of respect for partners, a lot of respect for collaborators, a lot of respect for knowledge. In fact, finally, it's a lot of respect back for everything, and that basic humbleness about knowledge, about other people, and that I think is actually the true quality of a good entrepreneurship. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Goh. We are coming to the end of the session today. I would like to thank all the participants that has attended the session today, taking time to at the end of the day. And of course, the organizers, ASEAN Academy of Engineering Technology, together with Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineering Entrepreneurship, for organizing today's session. Today's session is one and many more sessions to come. Do take note of the notice that will be sent out for other webinar session that is relating to technology entrepreneurship in ASEAN. So without further, so we would end today's session. Thank you everyone, and have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, Ko.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
បាទអីពូគាត់ថាសម្រាប់ឡើងទៅជាមួយខ្ញុំតថ្លៃឡើងទៅឲ្យពូឲ្យចាំដល់ថ្ងៃណាយើងខលទៅវិញអាហ្នឹងចាំខ្ញុំប្រាប់បាន